Danny and I got back from our long-awaited holiday to Italy last night. We spent the better part of a year planning and booking and looking forward to the holiday, and it turned out to be a fantastic week. We hired a car in Vienna and headed south towards the border with Italy. Our first stopover was in Venice, and I'd seen photos of the place, but they just don't do it justice. It's like being transported back in time to another world. The streets of Venice are like a labyrinth. There's narrow passageways that could just as easily lead to another dead end as lead you over a bridge into a square that has barely changed for the past few hundred years. After 2 nights in Venice, we headed further south to Tuscany. We stayed in an agriturismo, which is basically an Italian working farm. Our accommodation was in a room in a 500-year-old converted stone farmhouse, and our hosts make Chianti wine, olive oil and honey on their farm. The farm was situated in the hills overlooking the town of Greve in Chianti, and the view was just surreal. It looked more like an oil painting than a hillside. It was a privilege to stay in such a beautiful setting. We spent the next few days exploring Florence, Siena, and experiencing the food, wine, and scenery of Tuscany. The food was a real highlight of our time in Italy. Many of the meals are right at the top of my list of the best meals I've ever had. Danni is half Italian, and we visited her relatives in Trieste on the way back to Vienna. It's right near the border with Slovenia and Croatia, and it's a stunning city. I've had a hard time taking time off training in the past, especially when I lived in Europe before and was playing professionally. I'd feel guilty about taking the time off, and I'd feel like I wasn't doing everything I could to get better and train harder and become a better player. But I'd like to think that I'm wiser this time around, and I've realised that it can be great to give your head and body a rest after a few months of very hectic training and competition. However, with that said, my motivation to get back into training is almost completely at zero. This happens every time I take some time off for training, and I find it a real challenge to get back into the groove of training. The more I practice, the more I enjoy the sessions, and it becomes like an addiction that I need to do it every day or else I feel like something's missing. But having the time completely away from training, just clearing it from my head, it feels like a distant thought to come back and practice hard every day. I did a session this morning, and it took a good hour before I found my groove, found my timing, and felt like I was playing all right again. By that time, my hips, my groins, and my back were sore, and I guess it's just from the complete lack of doing any of those movements in normal life. I mean, those movements basically only happen in table tennis, and they're very specific to certain areas of the body. It'll only take a few more sessions to get properly back into it, but it's hard work and not very enjoyable while that process is happening.